we've sort of been using prototypes, and I'm hopeful, thanks to Raphael and Gareth, that this hardware is the final version. Well, version one.
It's a nice box. I can turn on my light maybe.
Yeah, nice. Hopefully it has like one of those like little plastic bags around whatever's inside of it, like a little Sonos speaker. Nice.
Yeah, let's see. So there it is. There's our box. It's got the OpenEEW sensor sample for testing. Andy has sent me a candy bar. That's very cool. So thank you for the candy bar.
It's okay.
Now,
I always put Mexican tamarind sweets in all of my gift people.
Nice. I got one of those too. I don't know where I got it from. It's here somewhere.
so thanks for the candy bar. I don't know if that's legal for export import, but it's not farm stuff. All right. So then it's wrapped pretty nicely. I like the box. It's in the
in the other section.
What's that?
You missed the cable as well in the little fold out.
Oh yeah, here. All right, so in the fold out is so we have a cable thanks to the USB-C USB-A cable. So I get one of those, and then in the package here I've got there it is. It's got the 3D printed case. That's very nice, and 3D printed case opens. And so it's got a clear, that's sort of a translucent lid, and then the board itself is in the case. It actually fits in pretty tight. It's screwed in with 4 screws. On the outside, you see the Ethernet and the power, and then on the inside, you see. Well, we've seen pictures of it. Elsewhere, but that's really cool. And then the case itself clips on, nice little snap to it. That's cool. That's great.
I just uploaded the case design, so for anybody who wants to make the case on their own, it's now pretty straightforward, but I am going to update it again in a few days.
I don't think I'll be capable of doing that. I don't have anything to build things like that in my house.
Yeah, this isn't for everybody, I guess. I guess people who want to house sensors, but we're going to find a way for people who want to buy sensors to just get these as well 3D printed.
I was thinking on contributing to the firmware because I do have some experience in C++, but I'd have to look into that if that would be something that would be possible. Maybe I should just focus on the dashboard. We'll see.
Yeah.
So Walt is going to help with the firmware as well. So we're entering a new phase of the firmware.
Oh, well, I didn't actually know if he was going to join or not, because I showed him the project. I was the friend that referred him. I showed him the project. He was like, "You're doing what?" He seemed very interested.
Yeah, that should be fun. So I will power it up, Andy. Take control of your meeting again, and then we'll power it up later.
Okay, so really it was just I just wanted to just have this item in the agenda because I feel like there's a sort of milestone. We've got sensors which are more or less working, and I think in the next couple of days, 4 people, Gareth, Vaclav, and Raphael, will be sort of looking at the sensor in more detail. And if we get a big thumbs up, then we can sort of keep going. So that's the production. And then in parallel, we have the firmware, which Johnny just mentioned, and John. And with the firmware, that's also, thanks to John, has progressed. I don't know if there's anything we need to talk about with the firmware, John.
I just would encourage everyone to review the provisioning process, and I see that's on the agenda, so we'll maybe come back to that.
Okay, so let's go to dashboard. Ryan, what do you think?
We've got some real progress going on the dashboard. We got a little bit of a team that's showed up to handle some front end development, which is really cool. I gotta put a big thanks out to. So Johnny, do we call you Tur or Johnny? Which is your preferred?
Me Johnny, because I do realize my name is not very friendly to English speakers.
How would you, just out of curiosity, how would you pronounce it authentically?
Tude.
Yeah. I mean, I can handle that. It's up to you, though. I mean, I can call you Johnny.
Johnny's fine. It's what I
Okay.
recognize.
All right. Well, Johnny did a good deal of work on both the access page and the user profile page. And I put the link in the dashboard Slack for everyone to take a look at. The events page is going to change because Chris and I were talking earlier about making it a full map on that page, which I think will look really cool, and also having that as actually public facing so that you don't have to be logged in to see the events, which I think would be cool. And she said that she mentioned that to you, Andy, and that would be a good thing to try out. Kristen, having a like dedicated design and user experience person is like vital for this process. I mean, obviously for front end development, but she really, I think, brings the dashboard side of it together. And what I would say from the dashboard, for this meeting to kind of bring it all together, like if we could start viewing the dashboard and onboarding as one single process and kind of bring that coalition together. And I know a lot of that comes in with some of the back end and server development side of things. But all the user experience stuff that's going in the dashboard, I think we can extend to the onboarding process. So yeah, there's some progress. We need also a better fleshed out roadmap because there's people coming on and we just sort of need to manage what everybody's working on a little bit better. But I think we're going to be clean through with the pace we're going at right now, I think, and with a few other developers coming on. Like as far as the front end side of things, I mean, we could have like a MVP for the front end within a week or two. But then that brings into the question of like how all this connects in with the back end, which is kind of a integrated onboarding dashboard question.
May I ask what an MVP is?
Oh, what was that?
May I ask what an MVP is?
Sure, it's a minimally viable product. So it's basically what's the minimum to get out there to get everything working and getting people using it.
Right. Yeah.
So I was just wondering, like, where, as far as the back end server side of things for the dashboard and onboarding, do we? I know there was some talk on it on Slack, but yeah, I mean, it'd be great if we got an update on that. And if you want me to, jump in there and start trying to figure out some of the back end services, I mean, that's something that I can do now with on the Grio account or just on my own to play around with.
I believe one thing that would be very helpful, even before you have an API, is the structure of the API, like the data formats, not the formats, but say the field names will be for a user will be name, ID, and email, and that specific name, so we can already structure the dashboard.
And just on that note, I mean, one of the tasks out is to create kind of a mock API that'll have the shape of the data that we can use on the front end. Obviously, we need to fit that into a back end, but all these sort of systems that you see, Johnny, on the front end are all sort of connected to sensors and IoT and whatnot. Some are on the back end, and some of the shape of it is going to be determined by where we store all that information.
Yeah, exactly. There may have to be some changes made to my work depending on the shape of the data. Not too much, but obviously, the transition from dummy data to actual data is some changes will have to be made, obviously.
Yeah, definitely. But is there work going on with that now, or is that something that we need to do as far as like the back end services are concerned?
Yeah, I think there's definitely an integration piece, right? So we've got a place to host, right? A cloud account to set up a set of containers, set of applications to run them on the IBM cloud. We've got that. What we do need to do though is find a way to kind of settle on a good architecture, at least something that can be deployable itself pretty easily onto a container environment, run it locally as well. So there's definitely work going on there. John and I are working also with Adrian, who's coming back from vacation next week, kind of, I think, take a first stab at an architecture there. But what we do need is certainly an understanding of what's the data going back and forth. What's that look like?
Yeah.
We need an API designed for that, or if there's something already that we can start from that drives the dashboard. I'm not 100% sure we have that anywhere.
Yeah, and that's something we could definitely. So Kristen put together what data shows up on each screen, but that needs to be basically just rendered into something a little more technical of exactly how it's going to show up in whether it's JSON or whatever we use to transfer things. So that's definitely something we can get you as we finalize the designs.
Cool. I'll open an issue for it right now while we're on the call.
Yeah. Because once we have that, we can build. So the direct API connection with the dashboard, we still need to like build that connector, right? Because if you guys provision the services, or are you also building a server at the same time?
So I don't know if it's related, but there is another question I had about this, which is you know, the detection system. I've always thought of it as sort of decoupled from the dashboard system, and so any visual stuff. So we still have to talk about that, right? You know, we still have to talk about when the IoT data comes in, before it even hits the database and gets visualized somehow. It needs to be transformed by you know, our algorithms. And are those on cloud functions? Are those on an instance somewhere? You know, how are we handling that? Because that's happening, I would have thought, you know, separate to this discussion.
Yeah, I think so. If you look at the detection engine right now, the one that's in the OpenEEW detection repo, that is a monolithic Docker image that has several processes running within it. So it's got then an MQTT instance, it's got the time series database, and it has a bunch of subscribed clients of the Python scripts, right? What Adrian on our team was looking at was how do we split that into several different containers, including an Nginx container to host the dashboard. That was kind of what he was exploring. So I think we could use that as the seed of at least a local environment, just determining how all these logical components come together. And then from there, we figure out, okay, well, how do you deploy this thing on a hosted environment? That's where more of the complex architecture, the distributed architecture comes into play. But I think at least as a starting point for integrating the dashboard, that would make sense to me, is just figure out how, and I guess, Andy, that's for you to confirm too, but does that detection engine right now, as it's implemented or documented, does it capture enough of the whole system that it would be valuable? So here's, I'm just sharing my screen here. So this is what's in the detection engine. I'm not sure. Are you able to see this in yet?
Yeah, we're
good.
Okay. So there is basically what's involved in this guy is it's got the MQTT, it's got these scripts within it. It does some of the algorithms, and then it writes back to a database. I'm not 100% sure this piece was still in here. I may have had an open issue about it, but here we have kind of the dashboard that, in theory, it's got to connect. This thing is not within the Docker. These are kind of the hardware pieces, but this thing right here still has some access directly to the database, and I'm not sure if we cut this part out or replicate that in here, maybe this is the missing piece. I guess, Andy, you're talking about is the thing that actually flags it.
Yeah, exactly. So those, yeah. So that last square on the bottom left could be hosted anywhere, I guess. And I guess I think this now looks a bit dated, doesn't it? Because we've already talked about using IBM services for some of these things. But I would just say that for me, when the data comes into the MQTT, the first question is, what is that? Is that an MQTT broker in a container, or is that an IBM service, a Watson service? Regardless, there's a broker there. And then the next thing is when it goes to the detection, the first thing that happens is the Python script that does the detection. That's a bit of a placeholder, because the script in there at the moment does some STA, LTA. But what we're going to do, ideally, with the discussions earlier today, apparently, is offload that onto the devices. So the devices will already be sending some process data to the cloud, which actually means the detection script is no longer in its current form necessary. But we do need some other form of detection, and that's something Backlav, I think, has been working on. But we need to have a VM or something there which is going to take in the data from the sensors via MQTT and detect an earthquake. However, whatever that looks like, and that I think that still needs some definition. What the output is, what we expect it to look like when it comes out of that.
Yeah, and I would just add from the dashboard also. I mean, so my understanding is that we were talking originally about Docker as far as the dashboard because we wanted it to be broken up into regions, right? So we wanted individual networks to be able to provision their own Docker and then have stand up everything in these sort of isolated regional stuff. But if for the MVP, we're talking about basically being our own network managers, and we're using like IBM services to do that. I mean, we probably could just use like Cloud Foundry to launch the web application, and then individual IBM services around that. Are we still trying to fit everything into a Docker, or are we now basically dividing it up into different IBM services?
Yeah, I think that's kind of an open question, right? So we originally were saying, okay, we've got a Docker implementation. So ideally, as an open source community, folks are able to install and run and test things locally. And then, if we assume they can do that, the easiest way they can do that is if things are packaged as Docker images. The next step is, okay, if you want to run your own instance of this thing, you would take that and end up just deploying it onto Kubernetes instead, right? So instead of being the monolithic image, now you're going to pull the individual component images that are kept at the same level as kind of the development one. Now, so we've gone back and forth as to whether you set up your own services within that cluster. So you run your own Postgres, you run your own MQTT, you run your own web app, or an Nginx node in there, whatever it is, or whether you call out from that thing and maybe call up the Watson IoT platform or a database as a service, some of which are kind of going through a retirement phase, or whether the dashboard sits outside as a Cloud Foundry app because that's the easiest way to deploy it. I think those are all still kind of open questions, and they've got technical issues that need to be answered or decided on. And then there's obviously some life cycle type things. Is it easy? Is it cheaper? Is it easier? Is it, whatever it is for someone else to recreate an environment like this? What's the simplest way to do it? What's the most right balance between control and then outsourcing some of the complexity of running an MQTT broker, things like that?
A question for you, Daniel. If it was to be done on IBM services, could most of this be done on a light package? Could someone run this for free if they only had, say, 20 devices?
Potentially, right? So right now, if we were to assume that simplest thing is to give someone a deployment manifest that has a list of, Kubernetes commands and some startup scripts, what they would need to do is kind of the same thing that they do for this Kubernetes version. So in the same repo, if you go deploy here, it shows you that you can run this at least single node Docker on a Kubernetes cluster for free. The caveat is that with a light account, the default thing you get from the IBM Cloud, you can't run a free Kubernetes cluster. But if you get the light account if you don't add a credit card. But if you add a credit card, you can get a free cluster. It's not going to charge you anything. But by that, buying into the idea of, okay, I have a credit card on file, it unlocks some other free stuff, including the Kubernetes cluster. So you can do that. We also have some promo codes we can do to kind of short circuit that, but they only last for 30 days, sort of thing. So long story short, yes, if it's a Kubernetes service, the simplest possible thing would be to get up one of these free clusters. It's a single node cluster. You would have the set of images running on it, and it would probably, we'd have to figure out exactly what sort of load it can handle. And we can kind of run simulators against it, kind of figure that stuff out. But the other alternative is, yes, if instead of going to Docker and Kubernetes, we did it as Cloud Foundry. You could kind of do that too. I think there's some quota issues you run into running multiple apps there for free, things like that. But yeah, long story short, if we can package everything as containers, and just run it with a simple deploy script that's really recreatable everywhere, that's the best way from my point of view to do it. Gives the most control over the prescription. But there are other ways we can break it up to run it at lower cost, or maybe easier ways. We've got kind of, those are all questions I think we'd want to do.
Yeah, and I just have one more question for the dashboard, and then we can save everything for our dashboard meeting later in the week. But so if we built so if we're talking about the API client to simulate more live data in the next week or so, would there be any problem with adding like a GraphQL layer onto it? Would that conflict with anything that you guys are working on your end? Is it, I assume that we'll have to stand up some sort of like, server that makes the connections between the dashboard and whatever services we set up, and is GraphQL as a format something that's going to conflict with anything that's happening now?
Is it just a wrapper around a REST API, or does it? It is the concept of it, but I've never really used it in terms of applying it to an existing API.
It basically, at the end of the day, is just WebSockets. It's kind of a different way of doing WebSockets. So it instead of connecting to multiple REST endpoints, you're just connecting to just a single REST endpoint, and then once you're connected, it facilitates real-time data a little bit better. And even if it's not real-time, it basically allows you to control like polling really easily, so that we can update things every 15 seconds, or we can update things every 10 seconds, and it just facilitates that a little bit better than straight REST does. That was my yeah. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so it does require kind of an upgrade to the target API server, whatever it's doing. We need to have a server component as well as the in the code.
Yeah, it would need the the client side of it, and then there's the server side of it, and then we would need at least some sort of like code on the server side that would handle that the GraphQL. But I mean, that can connect to all the other IBM services. If we write that code, I just want to make sure that if we did that, we weren't conflicting with some sort of design that's already in progress.
I personally don't see a problem with it. No. I don't know, Andy. I think we have to do this work anyway of kind of figuring out how the client gets that app, that data that's that's kind of represented here.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we need to define what that thing is.
Okay.
So because we're doing that, I think we're open in terms of whether we, how we can install GraphQL, and I think that would be, from my point of view, I think this is the right time to talk about it. Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, from the dashboard perspective, it's I mean, all that works. It's just I guess whatever the service, whatever finally the IBM services that we add on at the end, that's where kind of the architecture questions that still need to be handled are. But yeah, we can start sort of playing around with whatever the mock version of information going into the dashboard is over the next week or so.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, and by the way, yes, just heads up, I'm setting up the account. I don't know if you guys already have accounts, but if you set up cloud accounts on the IBM cloud, I can invite you into the resource groups when I've got them set up, and then you can kind of you can explore with the free accounts, kind of see what sort of services are in there. So if you go to the catalog page, for example, you kind of see what's there. We'll likely end up doing a Kubernetes cluster, and then there's a bunch of Helm charts for installing stuff like MariaDB or Postgres on there. But anyway, yeah, that's maybe you can kind of probably a good thing to do is get kind of familiar with what is in here, and to bring to the conversation. We do have we do have an API service that I know I've put in front of our serverless functions, and that would be the kind of the right place I think to do it. It's called API Connect.
Yeah, I was just looking at there. It's
or API Gateway. I don't remember. It's one of the two.
I do have 2 more questions to ask in a minute if this part of the discussion is over.
Yeah,
that's all I need to know from the dashboard, and we'll just finish out the front end development and start thinking about how to start connecting that data to the back end, or what kind of the best way of doing all that would be over the next week or so. And Andy, Vaclav, if you want to, we got a few developers here, so if you want to throw some more features at this thing, we're by all means, we can probably build it.
Yeah, but I was wondering, I had this idea, this concept in my head a little while now. I don't trust users. And what I mean by that is that we need to probably take into account that maybe one of the sensors on the network isn't kosher, isn't actually providing real data. Maybe one of those sensors is actually spoofing their data and sending fake data to other sensors, and thereby disturbing the network. Or maybe we just have to make sure that these things are secure. So
So it's a good point, and we've actually had this discussion before. It's a really good point. I think the way we've discussed this in the past was that we're okay with I think in the early days of what we're doing here, we're still sort of sandboxing a little bit, and I think we're not going to ask people to stake their lives on our alerts at the moment, because we still have some things to do, and I think later on we will find ways to automate this so that we can instantly remove devices that are sending data which is not within the parameters that we're looking for, which isn't as complicated as it sounds. We can do that. So I think we'll get there. And then we've also had discussions about how we provision devices and make sure that a device belongs to a user that we trust. So I don't think we should worry too much about security aspects right now. Just get the MVP working, and then later on we can do it. But it is an important topic. We should definitely do it, but maybe not to the extent that we burden ourselves now with how data comes or not.
I wasn't suggesting doing it now. I was just thinking we should probably think about it someday. Yeah, Vaclav, you were going to say something?
Yeah, from the point of view of data, I wouldn't be worried about it too much. I have seen a lot of data now from the Mexican network, and I think it's quite unlikely that we will be facing some troubles just because the sensor is deployed somewhere noisy or malfunctioning or something like that. I don't think that it should cause any troubles. I think that if somebody put sensors on simultaneously on shake tables that would simulate earthquakes, in that case, in that kind of very sophisticated hacking, that probably would be possible. But unless somebody actively tries, I don't think that.
You have to be a special kind of evil to do that, and there's nothing really benefiting you to do that. But another thing we were going to probably discuss, but I didn't see it in the list today, was the usage of Discord as a communication platform. I think that was towards the end or something that we were going to discuss that, but I didn't see it.
Yeah, we can have it at the end. I think you're right, Johnny. I think that's a good discussion to have as well. Agree. Yeah. So yeah, let's put that as number 6 on our list. That's a good thing that we should discuss.
Yeah.
So just going through my list still here, shall we move on quickly to app and provisioning development, John?
Yeah, let's do it. All right, I'm going to share my screen so that let's pick a window. Let's do this one. All right, so you see that, right?
Yeah.
Cool. And just to describe, there's a lot of moving parts to this. You've got the Flutter application running on your mobile Android device. That's the upper left corner. You've got the sensor itself that's in the lower left corner. So that's what the user's going to be working with. In the cloud, you've got a Node-RED Cloud Foundry application. It's got 2 RESTful endpoints, and we're going to talk to them in a couple of different steps here. We have a cloud database in the background that's going to store metadata about the device and their owner and their user details. And then we have the Watson IoT platform, which is going to actually, in a line that I didn't draw here, you'll have your device talk directly to Watson IoT platform over MQTT. And this is just a provisioning process, so I don't show you the in production step. What I did is I narrate the steps here. So if you find the little number, you can kind of read what it does. And I won't do that now. Well, maybe we could do it through the picture. And I'm going to actually scroll down, and I actually took screenshots of each step, what the user would see in the mobile app, on the board, in some of the debug, if they would have. Now, the average user is not going to look at the debug messages, but I show you them because we're all developers here. And then what the cloud at the end, the last step will have a cloud record that's fully complete with both the board details and the user registration details. So you take like you saw that I did this just a half hour ago, is you take the board out of the box and you install a mobile app. You start the mobile app, and you well, the screenshots are more interesting, but let's walk through quickly the flow, and then we'll go look at the screenshots. So you start with one, you enter your SSID, because we have to, when you plug in your board, the board can't connect to your local network. So you have to tell it the SSID and password. And there's a protocol called Smart Config. So we're going to enter that detail in the mobile app. We're going to broadcast that on your network. The board itself, when you first power it on, says, oh, I don't know any of these networks. I don't have a password. I don't know how to connect. And so it enters into Smart Config listen mode, and it's waiting for the frames to come across the network. It detects the successful SSID and password. It connects to the Wi-Fi and then responds back to the mobile app with the MAC address of the board and the IP address. So that's step 1, step 2, and step 3. Step 4 responds. The board responds to the mobile app. Now the board is going to start to do some things. So in step 5, the board talks to the cloud. It sends details to the RESTful interface called activation. And activation is it's a part of a flow on the Node-RED app. I'll show you a screenshot later of that flow. It determines, is this device registered in IoT platform? If it's not, it creates the device type, the device entry, and you can now start to send data to what's an IoT platform. It also does so that's in step 7. Step 8, it checks to see if this MAC address is new, and if it's new, it adds an activation date and a last check-in timestamp. If it's not new, it just updates the last check-in, so we always know when a board came to life and what was the last time it checked in. So those are the two kind of dates that the database will have. So that's step 8. And we see that the activation endpoint talking to the cloud and backend in step 8. Step 9, we're going to jump back up to the mobile app, where the mobile app, because right now the board, all it knows is that it can send data to the cloud. It doesn't know who it belongs to. It doesn't know where it is on the planet. It's just sending data to an entry, MQTT and to the cloud. All right, so what we're going to use the mobile app is to complete the user registration. And so while that's occurring for the board, the users, there's a couple of different forms in the mobile app. They enter their first name, last name, email address. There's a little review. The app itself, since it's running on a smartphone, has access to the GPS of the device. It figures out where it is, city, country, latitude, longitude, gives you a little registration summary. The user presses the button. It then sends the data to another RESTful interface running in the same Node-RED app. It's number 10. That data gets received in the OpenEEW registration step, and the app then in step 11 checks to see if that record exists. If it does exist, it does an update. If it doesn't exist, it does an add. And then in the last step, 12, the merged record is all available for Brian to actually put on the dashboard. All right. And then what I have below is actually screenshots of it. So here we launched a mobile app. You start it on your phone. It comes up with a get started step. Then you connect to the Wi-Fi. You type in your SSID. You send that to the board. The board is sort of powering up for the first time, and the board's just sort of waiting at that point. So this is step 2 still. So step 2, I grabbed some of the Flutter debug from the mobile app, and you can see that it enters this smart config step. It's called ESP Touch. There's a library I'm calling. It starts to broadcast the Wi-Fi SSID details. And if it succeeds, you get a message down here, and you get back, we'll come back to this later, but that's the MAC address of the board. And that's going to be important because the MAC address is the key thing that I'm able to connect the two of them together and be able to match up the SSID, the MAC address from the mobile app and the MAC address from the board. And that's going to tell me how to find a record in the cloud database so I can bring all the user details together. Okay, so the board itself powers up. It's sort of brand new. It has sort of a non-volatile memory to it, so it reads the non-volatile memory. If it's brand new, it's not going to find any. In my case, it actually found a few. There was one stored. It's not the one I wanted to connect to, so it enters here, right? So it found some other network. It enters into smart config, and now it's just going to go ... wait forever for the Flutter app to send it what it needs to connect to this network. Eventually, you get the details and say, "Oh, I can connect." So it connects to the Wi-Fi, and it responds to the mobile app. It gets the Wi-Fi MAC and the Ethernet MAC. It then syncs the time, so it gets the time correct. It calls the entry point. Remember that activation entry point, and it sends its MAC address and the firmware version that's running local on the board. And we're going to use that detail to see if there's any upgrades necessary. My little flow here doesn't tell you about that, but the Node-RED endpoint responds. It's going to respond. So 200 success. It's going to send the MQTT broker, like how to connect to that MQTT broker. Tells you the version of the firmware. And if these two versions don't match, it's going to pull down the firmware, whatever version, from some URL, and it's actually going to launch. It pulls down this binary, and it restarts itself and upgrades the firmware. But otherwise, it starts to connect to the MQTT and initializes MQTT and initializes the sensor, the accelerometer, and starts to send data to IoT platform. So that's the board is doing it. So now the actual endpoint itself is all written in Node-RED, sort of in the 4th section of the Node-RED flow. So here, well, the entry point is up top. That's section 1. But then it does some work in section 4 here that determines whether the device is on Watson IoT platform. That's the purple node. It does a check, and if it's not there, it adds it. Same thing happens. So then it writes the data to the cloud database. That's sort of in the 3rd section here. You see the light blue. Those are light blue, or is the cloud database. It does first a check. It's actually right here. It does a check if this thing exists. If not, it adds it or updates the record with less timestamps. And you see that in the blue that I've marked. Now, while all that's happening, the user is filling in on their device their first name, last name, their email. They press the submit button. They get a little summary panel. They press the registration button there, and it calls a RESTful interface, which is the second section in our Node-RED flow. It then calls the third section again, but takes sort of the top part of that. It again queries the cloud and database. Does this record exist? If it does, it creates it or updates the details. And essentially, it brings it all together in the cloud database. So now this is my MAC address of my board. And so that the database is indexed by the MAC address. So I can always look up, does this record exist, if I know the board's MAC address. And so at the end of this merged process from two different points, I get a full record of when it was activated, when was the last check-in, what is the firmware version, its location based on the smartphone GPS, so latitude, longitude, the city and the country and the planet, and then my registration details. And then the board says thank you, and that's so the app says thank you, and you're done. So anyway, that was 10 minutes of me narrating. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's amazing. I think you completely cracked it. That final screenshot with all of the device data is exactly what we were trying to get, and you somehow reversed. You sort of worked it out. It's great.
Yeah, that's exactly the stuff we need for the dashboard. So, I mean, if there's live data in there now, we can start trying to connect that up and see and get some going up on the dashboard.
There's live data. There's my board, and there is Gareth's board.
I do have a question, John. You sort of you didn't discuss the situation where a board is connected by Ethernet.
So
we are forced to use smart config, right?
You're gonna be forced to. So what'll happen is it'll be sort of like this half a record. You'll get, so what'll happen is the board is going to wake up, say, oh, I don't need any of this smart config stuff. Well, I think I forced you down the smart config path, because otherwise I know this from the very beginning, right? And I can skip over everything, and I can talk to the cloud over the Ethernet cable, and I can register the MAC address and the firmware version, but I can't, there's like no owner at that point. And so you'll just get a very skinny database entry without any ownership. And so I think what we're going to have to do is force people down the mobile app, like activate your board type of thing.
And once it's activated, you can plug in your Ethernet cable, and that's fine because the MAC address is now registered.
Yes. Yes. Now, this is like only you saw me take it out of the box. I'm going to have to test the Ethernet path because there's like a lot of different error conditions that can occur, which I wrote in the code, and I just don't know if they work because I've never tested it. So I'll know in a couple hours whether my in theory, I take you down the right path or not.
Quick question from the how we might use the information. So I see there's a last check-in timestamp. How long would you say that goes until we say that it hasn't checked in or it's not online?
So this is just when the board powered up. So the activation date is like the first time ever, like born on date. And the last check-in was the last time the board powered up. Okay. There's another. So once the board starts, and I don't have mine powered up, there are there actually are dashboards. I built dashboards along with at this. If you actually go to OpenEEW device, you guys can all. I lost it here. Crap.
Yeah, my board is powered up, and you can just change the sample rate on it, and it will start sending.
Okay, that's cool. All right, so everyone can log in. Well, actually, everyone can view the flow. They can't make edits, so you all can come here and hit the launch button. So this is what Gareth does. So Gareth's board. So there are. Let's just take you over to the activation one. So now these are the two records that are in the database, and neither one of them are on right now. All right, so we're not getting any data. So let's go and turn on Gareth's board, so we can go over to control the Ethernet, control your devices. We're going to select on Gareth's. And we're going to turn the sample rate. So we can send an alert, an earthquake alert, a simulated earthquake alert to his board. Right now we're going to do is turn it on. So let's do a submit of the 31 samples per second. Ready? We'll press submit.
Sorry to interrupt very quickly. If I understand Ryan's question, though, is Ryan, were you wondering whether we could have the status of the board as a sort of more active thing rather than waiting a day or two before it resets?
Yeah, so I mean, right now in the board, there's basically this, this page only with less features, and I'm wondering like how we can either bring some of those features into the dashboard, or at least have how we would use the information that's being sent to the database as a way to know whether or not the board is online or not.
Yeah. So I'm gonna take you there in a second, Brian. I'll show you what else we can do.
Yeah.
So what you see here, so I'm now watching live data from Gareth's board, and you'll notice that my record has latitude, longitude, location, because I actually used the mobile Flutter app, but because Gareth doesn't have the mobile app, he just has a very sparse record. He just has his device and his last check-in date. And so if you shake your board, Gareth, we'll hopefully see that a second or two later. I don't know what the latency is. No. What was the latency? We finally see it.
Earthquake in the UK.
Yep.
Yeah, there's an earthquake in the UK. All right. So let's go turn that off now. It just doesn't handle it well. All right, so now what I'm going to do is to answer Ryan's question. This is actually live data down in Mexico. And so this is just a map of Mexico, and these are the MX nodes. I think I painted in 30 seconds or so. Yeah, we may have to hit refresh here. I don't remember if I pinked it right away. I should. This is the flow that builds this map here. So we should see in 30 seconds, like they should all be green. There we go. They're all green. And so this actually has last check-in of like a couple of seconds ago. Now, if you were to go fake like one of them going offline, so there's a sensor, I'm just going to press the sensor down button. And now it's not checked in. And after about 30 seconds or so, one of these boards will go black, like offline, dead.
And this dashboard is making that connection directly through MQTT, right? Do I understand that correctly?
Yes. So let me just. Oh, so I didn't actually turn it on, but if I were to go turn this on, you actually would get real data from all the boards. I could go enable that. I don't
So,
think I do this. This is tied to the AWS. There you go.
do
Now
we
it's
actually
live.
have any boards apart from testing boards currently deployed?
Oh yeah, no, there's boards out in the field. These are actually real boards, real locations, like real sensor data.
Grio deployed a whole set in Mexico already as part of their startup, and then we're building the open source version of what they've built to scale out from there.
That's right. And the data from these are available, and we're more than happy to, on a case by case basis, give people access to the live feed, although it's a bit of a pain.
So I just faked an earthquake on sensor, and I sent a Twilio message to myself here, so I can. There's a unlock my phone. I think my phone is still active. So I just got a Twilio message that there was an earthquake. If it refreshes, I see my wife and my sister and my cousins and my kids. There it is. So yeah, there was a possible earthquake at MX15. So that was like me faking an earthquake there. The other thing you can do, and I don't want this to be a demo of like all my Node-RED examples, but Johnny's here for the first time. So you can go enable this, and I'm going to go disable the other one because it just gets too much data.
I don't really know what Node-RED is, so I'll have to look into that.
Oh, it's a visual programming technique. It's all event-driven. So now I can go pick a board, say board. So now this is live data from a board somewhere in
Oaxaca.
Yeah, Oaxaca. Thank you. So that's real data from a board in Oaxaca.
So just being conscious of time here. I think we probably should have the hosting discussion, because so the alerting. What you just mentioned, John, is actually would have transitioned us well into alerts. But I think we should probably have a much fuller discussion in another town hall, because what I was thinking we haven't ever discussed properly is how people are going to get alerts. And there's so many different ways. And many of them are very straightforward. And one of them, for example, is Discord, which we were talking about. So I think we should definitely table that for another meeting, and just sort of dedicate a lot of time to it, because that could be quite easy, that part actually. And in terms of the Discord discussion, I'm not sure what people think. I'm very much on the fence about it, because I know changing tools upsets some people more than others. So maybe not. I use Discord and other things. I know the advantages that I think, is this right, Johnny? Is that we can retain messages, which is what I can't search now for old messages in our free Slack channel.
You can retain pretty much everything apart from voice channel discussions, which is quite obvious. They don't record that for privacy reasons. You'd have to do that yourself. But you can retain everything: files, messages, and it's all free. All of it. There are no limitations set on the voice channels either, so you can just hop in there with thousands of people if you wanted to, although it is gonna break down if you do that, but that's besides the point. And I think that after a while, you might, if I recall correctly, I might be completely wrong here, but as more people join the Slack channel, you might actually have to start paying per person. I'm not even sure if that's correct, but I've seen instances of Slack channels having to pay up to thousands of dollars for because there's so many people in their Slack channel.
Right. Well, Johnny, given that we've run out of time, what I'm going to do, if everything agrees, I'm going to put in Slack, I'm going to put a poll. We've got a polling bot, and anyone can just vote whether or not they want to or not, and we can have a discussion there.
But I think we should probably weigh out, display the positives and the negatives of both Slack and Discord before we open up a poll, so people are informed.
Okay. Well, if you could help us, because you seem to be the most knowledgeable, if you wouldn't mind just maybe putting your thoughts on this in the general channel, and let people read that, and then I'll post a poll up, and we can read that.
Probably, if it's okay if I do that tomorrow morning, because it is getting, I'm getting a bit tired. Or is something highly important?
Yep. No, I think you can wait for tomorrow, definitely. Now, there's one other aspect here, right? So Slack is a Call for Code affiliate. So we've got a free license for our Call for Code Slack instance. So we've got 8,000 users in there. We're not paying anything. Potentially, we could reach out to them to see if they're willing to grant that access to this as an open source project. We tried to do that with a different project, and they weren't able to help us out. So it may or may not happen. Maybe they just did the one-off for the Call for Code workspace, but that's a potential thing. So I can go ask and see if they're able to do that.
Yeah, if you could, because that would be awesome if that's possible. Okay.
Yeah.
Can we do things? So can you find out, Daniel, and then maybe after that we can do a poll and see what everyone thinks about this.
Yeah, because if that solves our retention problem, maybe that's a piece of it. So I'll ask them. I'll see if we can connect out to them.
I mean, I know what would happen if we jump ship too early without having all of this in place. We are going to lose some users because some people, are like that. Okay.
Contributors or actual users?
Well, we have like 150 people, and I'm certain 50 of them would probably just not get the memo. But yeah. So if we can wait for the response from Slack, and then we can maybe in parallel post some of the advantages and take a poll as well.
It doesn't have to be rushed. We have lots of time. At least I think so.
Yeah, this is not a critical issue.
Indeed. But maybe even, I don't think if this is gonna be possible, but if we say we are gonna transition, it might be possible to get a Slack bot running to pull all the messages from the Slack channels that we have access to, and then transition them over to Discord. So that it's less of a pain to do that. But we'll have to see how that works.
Okay. Why don't we have this discussion in Slack? We keep it going in Slack. Make if you can make the case there, Johnny, we can have the discussion there. So I think we've hit the hour.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks, guys. That was productive.
Yeah.
Was anything else we missed?
Well, I just recording the recording I made. It might not be perfect. I have been coughing a lot because I do have allergies, but I hope it's not too noticeable. If you heard the recording did too, and I've not muted my mic because it makes a sound if I do that.
Okay.
So
I'm sure
where
it'll be
do I
fine.
send it to? It's video and audio. Only problem was that I was bothered by a VPN who said my trial was expiring, so that popped up in the middle of the meeting.
If you can just post it on your personal YouTube channel using your Gmail, or if you want to send it to me as a sort of Google Drive or Dropbox link, or however you want to do it. It doesn't matter where it comes from. Just any video hosting link, and put it on Slack.
On YouTube, do you want it to be unlisted?
It doesn't matter. It can be public, or whatever you want.
Right. Okay. Sounds good then. Well, that was indeed very productive. I think our next meeting for the dashboard. When is that exactly?
It'll be Friday.
Friday. It's not that far out. Cool.
That's not. No, we'll try. By then, we're going to try and get some get a little, refine the roadmap a little bit, and that's why we can talk some more of the programming in the dashboard.
I feel like the dashboard is taking up a lot of speed recently.
Definitely.
Right.
Okay, guys, this is awesome. Thank you so much again. I've got to run off, but thank you very much.
Yep.
Well, yeah.
Bye, guys.
See you. Bye.
See ya.
Take care.